And my voice, is my trademark. It's me.
I listen to the wind of my soul.
I like the fact that, if people hear my voice, they feel as if they know me, and they can connect with me, and I think that's a gift, really. It's the closest thing you can ever get to, I suppose, the vibration of the heart and the whole human being. I listen to the wind of my soul. Yeah, music is one way of coming back to a place of harmony within this universe, which is very large and very frightening sometimes, and especially when you meet people that, maybe not that friendly, then life becomes a bit of a problem. Some people were very puzzled the way that I just, withdrew from the music world. I picked up the guitar after many years of doing a lot of other things, charity, education, bringing up a family, traveling. And I really didn't miss it. I'd been in the music business all my life, since I was a teenager. You had to come up with another record. You had to do this. You had to do what people expected you to do. So for me to get a life was really, what I wanted. And so I finally, opted out when I discovered Islam. And I said, well, here's my chance, to get off my high horse and start joining the human race again. So I called my last album Back to Earth, appropriately. There's nothing in the Quran, of course, that prohibits music. Nothing that doesn't mention music. And when I asked the imam in the mosque, I told him that I'm a musician. He says, well, that's fine, you can continue doing that. So long as the songs are morally okay, there's no problem. Then I met another group of people who said, well, it's forbidden, musical instruments and all that and everything it's associated with, forbidden. I went, oh. So then I had these 2 points of view. And wherever there's grey area, you're going to have a dispute. So I said, well, I'm getting out of this. So I walked away. Then you realize that, hey, you're going to have to take your own view on this. And there is a school of thought which absolutely accepts the positive outcome from music and what it can create. So I started to understand that perhaps it wasn't as bad, wasn't as taboo as some people tried to make it out to be. And sometimes, there's a song that needs to be sung, and maybe you've got to sing it. One day at a time, we can learn to leave the past behind. It was my son's fault that I actually picked up the guitar. He's the one who suddenly I discovered. I've been listening to music, been writing his own songs, and suddenly he had a guitar and he brought it back into the house. And I said, what am I going to do with this? And then one morning, when everybody gone back to sleep, after morning prayers actually, I picked up the guitar and started playing some of the new songs. I'd been writing songs but without instruments. And immediately, I knew where to put my fingers, Wide and the trusting. I've discovered a few new chords, because now I'm kind of back to where I started, kind of having to learn things again a little bit. And I'm discovering more and more, ideas, which this kind of gap enabled me to sort of find. I like to take a walk out in the midday. Checking life out in the park. I think the whole album, in a way, breathes a kind of element of peace. And the first song is, it's one of the my favorites. It's a kind of very almost Brazilian or Latin feel, but it talks about, light and dark, and that's what, in a way, the album is talking about. midday kind of represents to me, when I think about it, is it goes back to Soho, that kind of area of London at night, you know. And I think about that little square called Soho Square, which stands very defiantly, you know, for nature. You know, in the middle of all this hedonism and frivolity, there's this little garden, and it doesn't change. You know, nature fighting neon lights and the modern city. I love that song. I think it's a great opener. Another Cup represents a lot of musical, you know, tastes and journeys. Even the title of the album came to me one day while I was looking at these little Turkish illustrations of coffee houses, you know, way back in the 15th century, where, you know, before all the kind of coffee house cappuccino thing ever hit Europe, it was happening over there in Istanbul. And I looked at that, and then I looked at my old cover, Tea for the Tillerman, and I kind of started making a connection with this cup. You know, there's a lot of different blends of influence in the record, and that's the way I like music. I don't like to only stick with one kind of style. And if you look at all my songs, you'll see, you know, from the beginning, I traveled a lot with my musical taste, and this album, I think, represents a good selection of the kind of music I like to listen to.
Green fields.
One of the first songs I did with Rick Knowles was like an old song which I had hanging around for about, I don't know, 1968. That's when I wrote it. So, Green Fields, Golden Sands. It was just an experiment to see how it feels, you know, to use piano, to use the whole kind of facility of the studio again. And it felt really encouraging. My voice was still there. You know, that was kind of evident. And you could see that Rick was excited. He'd been obviously producing a lot of hit records. I didn't know many of those records. I hadn't been really listening. But I liked the guy, and I found him very, very sensitive to my kind of music. And he's a lover of melody, you know, and so am I. You know, gradually, one song after the other, as I was writing and picking out a few old songs from the past, an album evolved. And then I realized I was in the music business again. You know, it was kind of a shock.
To those green fields and golden sands, that's all I need.
When I wrote that in 1968, it was like, it was a dream. It's like any dream, you know, of this world, trying to find a better place, a place where you can always be happy. I said in that song, I said, you know, and I'm not the only one, you know, who's dreaming.
One day we'll all realize I'm not the only one.
3 years later, John Lennon writes this song called Imagine, where he says exactly the same thing. He said, I'm not the only one. I thought that was incredible, because my song had never been released, never been heard. But of course, there was a resonance in the universe. Somehow we joined in this thought together. And that really is still lovely to think about.
That's all I want. That's all I need. That's all I really want.
People may have heard about, you know, an important moment in my life where I had everything you needed, you know, and all that. And I was swimming in the coast of Pacific coast there in Malibu, Los Angeles area. And I was out in the ocean, and suddenly I couldn't keep myself up. And I thought, well, this is it. This is the end, you know. And without any sort of second hesitation, I suddenly realized there was help. And I said, God, if you help me, I'll work for you. At that moment, a little wave, you know, came from behind me and pushed me forward. Suddenly the tide, it seemed, had changed, And I was swimming back to shore. I was alive. I'd been given my chance again.
I go where true love goes, I go where true love goes.
And that's what this song, you know, Heaven, Where True Love Goes. It tells us that wherever we are, whatever our troubles, you know, there's an overriding control over our lives. We should look to that control if we want to, you know, to get out of any trouble.
Follow true love, follow true love. Follow true love, follow true love.
The video, in a way, is keeping things open and keeping it as wide as possible for people to interpret the way they want. The story of the boy is obviously, you know, there's nothing really stronger than a mother's love. You know, there's nothing stronger than that on this earth.
When
I've created a picture and a canvas where people can dive into, you know, this heaven where true love goes, and people can get what they want from that. I started writing my own songs because I didn't really sing anybody else's that well, and I might get it wrong, and I've only recorded a few songs that other people have written because I can't quite connect. It's got to be really tailor-made.
people, do you understand me now?
But I did one for this album called Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. Now that has obvious connotations for my kind of position these days. And I loved Nina Simone. And I used to love her songs, and that one particularly.
But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
My wife heard me singing it one day at home, and she said, "Why don't you do that?" I said, okay. And I got my laptop out, and I recorded it in my living room. Peace Train is I suppose, going to be around a long time. You know, it's still on its way, and it hasn't arrived because, same as like there's a bell in the United Nations called the Peace Bell. Well, they're supposed to be rung when there's no war in the world. Well, hardly been rung. So therefore, we're having to live with the reality of war, of conflicts. But that doesn't stop us from dreaming. It doesn't stop many human beings from wanting to join together to shout against it. In the old days, like Peace Train used to be one of my big ending numbers. You know, it was like the song, which everybody had to hear, and I kept it for the very end. You know, and it was really powerful. There is something about the live event which I like, but it's always a trauma. You know, in the old days, I used to drink. You know, well, I don't drink anymore. So I have to go out there really cold. but there is a warmth which happens when I walked on stage, you know. People just respond. And then, wow, that heats me up immediately. And all of a sudden I feel, yeah, I can do this. It's interesting that maybe there's a world is actually kind of like an extension of Peace Train, whereas now we're looking for another world rather than a destination on this earthly terrain. So, but it's not really a problem of this world, it's a problem of the people who live on it.
Open up a world and let me in, then there'll be a new life to begin.
I very rarely planned my life. You know, when I did, it would never turn out the way I wanted it. So things happen to me normally through my instinct, and I think that right now, for me to sing is exactly what's needed. That's the way I feel. And where it ends up, you know, what happens next, I don't know.
Maybe there's a world that I'm still to find. Open up a world and...
There is a cultural difference between what, you know, I represented as Cat Stevens to what I represent today as Yusuf Islam. That's true, but it's me. And all the things I was dreaming about as Cat Stevens, my God, a lot of them have come true as Yusuf Islam.